How's it going, everybody? This is Cameron White with White Light Astrology, and welcome back to your favorite weekly horoscope. What the fuck is going on in the universe for October 14th through the 21st of 2019? Thank you guys so much for being here. I'm super excited to be back. It has been a very long month for me, and I got all of your guys' prayers and your thoughts and all of the comments that I got on my last video. It meant the world to me. It felt so good how many of you guys reached out to make sure I was okay, and just knowing that I had the support from you guys just made me feel really good. It was a very challenging time that I had to go through last month, but I'm really excited to be back here today. And we've missed a lot. I haven't done videos in like a month, and a lot just happened in September. But the one thing that I did want to hit on, since we're not going to have too much time to talk about, Mars going, now entering into Libra. We missed Venus in Libra. We missed the full moon in Pisces and all of that kind of stuff. But the one thing I wanted to talk about as we go into this week is Mercury is now in shadow. Now, I did just do a Mercury retrograde video in Scorpio, so it's going to be posted right here. If you guys want to check that out after this, that would be super cool. But now that Mercury is in shadow, we have to remember we're playing a different game. This is stuff that's going to come up again. As we go into this week and we go into the next coming weeks, basically through October, November, this is when we're going to start to see all of the Mercury retrograde noise that it's going to bring. When Mercury is in shadow, that means that's when Mercury is transiting the part of the sky it will eventually retrograde in. And something that you kind of notice with Mercury being in its shadow is that the events that occur while Mercury is in shadow are the events that you'll be coming back to once Mercury is retrograde. So it'll be really important to kind of, keep a mental note out, be aware of what's going on, especially because this is happening in the sign of Scorpio. Mercury is the communicator. Mercury is all about spreading messages. However, in the sign of Scorpio, Scorpio is about, being deceptive, about hidden things, lying underneath, the surface. This is about pulling up things from the dark. That's what Scorpio is all about. And so while you have Mercury transiting through Scorpio, you may not see everything that you need to. There might be some stuff hidden underneath, or stuff that you're not even seeing or that you're not even looking at. So while Mercury is in shadow, this is going to be a really important time to just keep your mind aware of what your surroundings are, what's going on, what are some hidden agendas that can come up, what are the unexpected events that, could definitely, happen that you may not expect, but you should probably prepare for anyway. Because that's what a lot of this Mercury retrograde is going to be. So the W Brothers are actually launching a campaign to raise more awareness around the lack of self-confidence that people can have. And if you're anything like me, you can definitely struggle with self-confidence almost on a day-to-day level. Now, I really like these rings. They're made out of premium grade A silver. And what I really like about this is that a portion of these proceeds are actually going to be going to the ADAA, which is the Anxiety and Depression Association of America, which their whole goal is to raise more awareness and to find better cures for anxiety and depression. And so I really like these rings. You guys should check it out. I think this would be a great gift for yourself or for someone that you know, especially with the holiday season coming up. If you guys are interested in checking this out and supporting their cause, go ahead and go to the links in my description below and go ahead and check it out. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the horoscope. So starting on Monday on October 14th, we just got off of this full moon in Aries. Now, what I really find interesting about the full moon in Aries is while the sun's in Libra, it's in its sign of fall where things are starting to, die in essence. Once the sun goes into Scorpio, everything's kind of dying in the northern hemisphere. But as the sun's in Libra, it's about balancing things out, going what's worth, putting an investment to, what's not worth putting an investment to. And when you have this full moon in Aries charged up by Mars, it's making us feel a lot more decisive, a lot more energetic with where we're going, with what we're doing, why we're doing it, and getting all, ramped up to do it. Now, this full moon in Aries is probably leaving you guys, excited or at least determined and, fixated on a certain goal. But as we get into Monday, the moon is going to enter Taurus and going to make a conjunction with Uranus. So as we go into Monday, we're coming from this energy of, feeling charged up, wanting to go somewhere, to getting a little bit more calmed down as the moon's in Taurus and feeling a little bit more stable. But you have to remember, with Uranus being right there, the planet of unpredictability, the planet of ups and downs, it's very volatile, it's very, it's just Uranus energy. And as the moon conjoins it, this is definitely going to be a time of, are you going to be able to find that security and that stability that you're looking for in the old way of doing things? Or do you have to continuously innovate yourself and do something new or do something different that maybe you haven't done before? And maybe that will offer a lot more security and stability in the type that you're actually looking for. And you have to remember, we're coming up to the new moon in Scorpio, which is going to be basically opposite Uranus, and that'll be next week. So we're going to get comfortable and familiar with this Uranus energy here coming up in the next 2 weeks. And with that, with Mercury also being in shadow, like this is like Uranus and Taurus kind of things where you think are stable and that are grounded may not be exactly what they appear. And this Mercury in Scorpio, while it's in shadow, may be starting to bring up things of like, maybe I'm starting to see where that can be a problem later, or maybe I don't exactly trust this situation or trust this person or whatever it is. It's just about really being aware of what things can happen. But then as we get into Tuesday on October 15th, that is when the moon's going to be applying to a trine with Saturn, which is going to be helping us, get a little bit more of that security, get a little bit more of that stability that we're looking for. Saturn and Capricorn saying, hey, if you want it, you got to work hard for it, and it's not going to be fun because putting in a 12-hour shift isn't really always enjoyable. But Saturn and Capricorn is, again, like, it's kind of like, you don't, get a fit body just by waking up. Like, you have to put hard work and commitment and dedication into it, but you reap those rewards after all that hard work, and that's what Saturn's all about. So as the moon applies to Saturn, this is a good time to remember that if you really want those results and if you want to stick to that commitment, you've got to be willing to put in that work and put in that dedication. That's kind of what Saturn's asking for us. But also on Tuesday, we're going to have the moon oppose Venus and Mercury. Now, we haven't even talked about Venus being in Scorpio, which is a whole nother level. You have to remember, Venus is the planet of love and beauty. She wants you to bring things together and touch them and hug them and feel them. And Venus is wanting to party and socialize. But Venus is in her sign of detriment. And the way that this kind of works is like Venus is very far away from home and she doesn't have all of the tools or the comfortable environment that she would like in order to prosper the way that she wants to. And while Venus is in Scorpio, she kind of has to value a little bit more of different things to kind of get what she needs to get done. Venus in Scorpio doesn't really operate as well as Venus could, like as per se in like Taurus or Libra. But the idea with the planet in its detriment is that it has a little bit of resources to use to fulfill its powers. And while it's in Scorpio, this is being painted in the way of like, when it comes to what our attachments are, when it comes to what we love, when it comes to what we're valuing, it becomes a little bit more deeper than the materialistic way that Venus can often have us see. It comes a little bit deeper and it's a little bit more hidden, and it can be a little bit misunderstood. Venus is in Scorpio where it's kind of like, Venus has to do Mars things, or has to do Venus things in a Mars way, as to say. And, it's kind of hard to be a gardener in a war versus a warrior in a garden, but that's kind of the analogy that we're looking for here. And on Tuesday, as the moon opposes Mercury and opposes Venus, this is kind of like looking at the other end of going, hey, if I want this stability, if I want this security, if I want to keep things calm the way I want to with this moon in Taurus, what do we need to look deeper into? Where do we really need to value? Because nothing, while everything may seem surface level right now, things are going to get deeper. Things are going to get a lot more, crossed and entangled together. So while the moon's opposing Venus, look a little bit deeper for where you can find that security, where you can find that stability, where you can find that comfort, because it's going to require you to get out of your own way, to do something innovative, to really harness that Venus energy while you can. Then on Wednesday, on October 16th, that's when we're going to have the moon enter Gemini. Now, really not a whole lot else is happening on Wednesday, but as the moon does go into Gemini, this is going to be the time to open up to bigger ideas, be open to bigger perspectives, communicate more, research more. The moon's in Gemini. This is a good time to basically communicate, go over everything. But what I will say is while Mercury is in Scorpio, that's Gemini's ruler, and it is in shadow, like this moon in Gemini transit, this might be when more information is revealed. This might be when more messages are delivered to you that are going to come up later with this Mercury retrograde. So just be hyper aware of these things. And then as we go into Thursday on October 17th, that's when the moon in Gemini is going to start to apply to a trine with Mars while it's in Libra. And we haven't even talked about Mars in Libra. I've been gone for so long. But Mars in Libra is interesting because this is also in Mars's detriment sign. We have Venus and Mars in this weird mutual reception where Venus is in Mars's sign and Mars is in Venus sign, and they're kind of like, what do we do? But as Mars is in Libra, what you can kind of struggle with is, being indecisive, not knowing which way to go, being complacent and being okay with it, because that's another thing that Libra energy can be, kind of bad with. And as Mars is here, where Mars is supposed to be decisive, Mars is supposed to be direct, Mars is supposed to be blunt, Mars in Libra is kind of like, let me just kind of not push my agenda or do what I want to do or, go the way I want to go for the sake of someone else or for the sake of something else. However, as the moon starts to trine Mars, this is kind of giving us more information to work with to kind of tip those scales onto one side or the other. So if you're still debating on what you should do and you're still contemplating, procrastinating big Mars and Libra things, while the moon's in Gemini and you receive this new information, kind of put it on the scales and see which way you should start to maybe channel your energy more in and which way you should not channel your energy. And then as we get into Friday on October 18th, that is when the moon is actually going to oppose Jupiter. And Jupiter's been direct for a while. We just missed Jupiter squaring Neptune. I didn't even get to talk about that, sorry. But Jupiter is now in the last decan of Sagittarius. This is when we get to get the ripest Jupiter in Sagittarius. And the moon's opposing it, where the moon in Gemini receiving this information, because it's emotionally charged information, so you're kind of like wanting to act out of impulse with it. It's opposing Jupiter, which Jupiter's this planet of beliefs, kind of like being in this open sign of Sagittarius, where it's like, are you going to question these things? Does this information make you question your beliefs? Does this information go against what you believe? And what are you going to do about it? Are you going to focus on a bigger picture and hope for the best with Jupiter and Sag? Or are you going to rely on the information that comes to you with the moon in Gemini? And I think that that's going to be an important decision to make on Friday, because it kind of comes down to, are you willing to be open and trusting with the universe, with what your outcomes can be, or are you more willing to rely on the information that's at hand? And my biggest opinion, or my best advice I should say, is do both. Like, this is Jupiter and Sag. Believe big, hope big, take big leaps of faith. But while the moon's in Gemini, information is pretty critical. Information is pretty important, especially as Mercury's retrograding. It's just going to be a note to make. It's going to be something to be aware of, and it's going to be something to consider when you're doing anything on Friday. Then, as we get into this weekend, on Saturday, on October 19th, the moon is going to enter its home sign of Cancer and start to make a square to Mars. So as Mars is at the beginning degrees of Libra, the moon will be at the beginning degrees of Cancer. The moon is now in its home sign, where it can kind of process this information, feel it all out, let it boil and deepen your belly and whatnot. But as the moon goes into Cancer and it starts to square Mars, it's kind of like we can have this insecurity around which direction to take, because the moon in Cancer, you have to remember, Cancer is a double-bodied sign just like Libra is. While Libra is more about tipping the scales, with Cancer, just like Gemini and all the other double-bodied signs, there's two parts to every story. There's two perspectives. There's two things kind of going on. It's not necessarily black and white. It's just two different things. And the moon in Cancer is kind of like, oh, but all of these things matter to me, so I need to be able to do both. But Mars in Libra is like, well, we can't really do both. We have to kind of pick one or the other, and that's what Mars is struggling with. So on Saturday, as we go into this weekend with the moon in Cancer, this is going to be a good weekend to kind of feel things out for yourself, because even though on Saturday we have this moon square Mars, then we get into Sunday where the moon starts to trine Venus, it starts to oppose Saturn, where these decisions kind of become a little bit critical. As the moon starts to trine Venus, the moon in Cancer is kind of like, I need to be nurtured, I need to be felt, I need to express, and that's trining Venus in Scorpio, and Venus in Scorpio is like, you know what, fuck it, like, I do need to feel something, I do need to act out, I do need to hold something with intensity and with passion. That's what Venus in Scorpio is all about. But as the moon opposes Saturn, Saturn's in Capricorn here, on Sunday, this is kind of like, we may not be able to do both things. We can't always have both. We can't always have our cake and eat it too. However, this is where it becomes that hardline decision of what's going to be best for you. The moon's trining Venus, the moon's trining Neptune, Venus is going to be trining Neptune. There's a big, confusion and a blur, an emotionally charged response with what we might think we want or what we value or where our emotions are at. But keep in mind on Sunday that this decision may be a little bit more critical. The moon's opposing Saturn. We do need to take care of things, but what needs to get addressed first? And that's what Saturn in Capricorn is all about, addressing what's important. But then as we get into next week, on October 21st, on Monday, we have the moon going into Leo. We have Venus trining Neptune, and we have Mars squaring the nodes and right in the middle of them. And so Monday is going to be a pretty big day, because as the moon goes into Leo, we'll be feeling a lot more hyped up, a lot more energized, a lot more confident after going through the process that we went through over the weekend. But as Venus starts to trine Neptune, this is where our passions, our desires that we're locked into, that we can be holding on to for dear life, can start to become a little bit blurry, a little bit hard to understand and confusing, and it could seem as if it's all a dream, and that's this really big, I don't know how else to explain it, but very dreamy, very, elusive. However, Mars squaring the nodes, this is kind of a big turning point. Mars is starting to go away from the north node and start to go towards the south node. And this is a big, on a big picture level, this is kind of like changing our direction with where we're wanting to head into versus what do we need to address that needs to get left behind. It's kind of like when you are moving, you don't just leave all the stuff you don't want at the house. You got to pack that too, but you got to take it somewhere else. And that's kind of like Mars being in the middle of the nodes, kind of switching, your energy from, oh, I'm packing all the stuff I want to, well, I still have to pack up this stuff because it's mine, but I don't want it anymore, so I have to figure out a way to get rid of it. But then, as we get into next week, we have the Sun going into Scorpio, and Scorpio season begins. We have the Sun opposing Uranus during the new moon in Scorpio. That's also going to be opposing Uranus, which is really charged up. I hope you guys are really excited for it, because that full moon is also, or I should say that new moon is also in Mars square Saturn, which is a pretty big deal because this new moon is in Scorpio. Scorpio is ruled by Mars, so we look at Mars and it's in its detriment squaring another malefic in its domicile. So it gets pretty intense as we get into next week. But with that being said, again, thank you guys so much for being here, liking, sharing, commenting, subscribing. I love and appreciate every single one of you guys, and I'll be seeing you next week.